Before we get started, just a reminder that you can find all of my available rental properties on my website at marcguzman.com. If you own investment property, click on the Owner Services section to see our complete list of services. This episode is brought to you by Beniked Commercial Real Estate. There's more to building wealth in real estate than simply buying and holding. You need to have an entry and exit strategy. You need to know when to invest, have a plan to maximize return during the holding period, and have an exit strategy to sell and exchange the property into a bigger investment. This takes a set of highly qualified professionals to guide you from buying your first investment property to eventually upgrading to the 100-unit complex, providing wealth for you and your family. Brian Beniked and David Peel have over 35 years of combined experience specializing in helping families build wealth through real estate. They assist you in putting your investment on autopilot and will guide you along each exchange. Visit them at www.bcre.co. Again, that's www.bcre.co to give your future a jumpstart. Over the last few months, the California housing market has started to cool down. Not at alarming levels that would suggest a recession or anything scary, but enough to catch the attention of those in the real estate industry around the state. Today, our guest is Kerri Naslund Monday, who deals with auction sales online, to talk about how her business model is impacted by a cooling housing market. We also talk about the prospects of rebuilding Paradise, California, as well as pick Kerri's brain about her favorite board game, Monopoly. Well, Kerri, thank you for coming back onto the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
This is your third time, right?
This is my third time here.
Yeah, because I think the first time was at my old office, and then this is the second time here in the new studio.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. Three-timer. So we were just briefly talking about financial planning, real estate, and just to briefly recap for some of the people, one thing that personally I would like to see is maybe real estate services mixed in with a little bit of financial planning. And maybe you're right, not necessarily the same person or same company because of conflict of interest that you brought up. But, you know, if there's services that could be utilized in conjunction with each other to where a buyer can then really plan properly to buy a house. That's kind of where I'm going with that. I think that would be great.
Not only financial planner, but also a tax professional and then a lender. It would be awesome to see a row of storefronts and have the real estate office right next to the financial planner, right next to the lender, right next to the tax advisor, and then that person could be serviced completely through all of those businesses.
Yeah, I know one of the things I've struggled with in working with a lot of investment clients is really pushing them to get the tax and financial advice that they need.
Right.
Because they come to me with certain ideas and I kind of have to tell them, hey, you can't really do this, or this is not really the best way to do it.
Right.
But why don't you talk to who does your taxes? I could refer you to somebody. And most of the time they say, oh, no, I do my taxes, or I know somebody, they do my taxes for me.
Right.
Okay, go talk to them. The problem is they never do.
Yeah.
And so it's a matter of, how do you push your clients to really go talk to these other professionals? I know at the end of the day, it's kind of on them.
Right.
You know, they don't want to talk to these professionals, but how do you and your team work it?
Well, we always go back to the script of, hey, I'm not a licensed tax advisor or financial planner or any of the rest. So we really highly recommend that you have a conversation with one of these folks, because it's really important in your decision-making process right now. I'm not supposed to give tax advice, or I'm not supposed to give financial planning advice, but this is what I've seen out there. But stuff changes all the time. I mean, taxes are changing all the time. Just the tax reform that's about to go into play in April is going to be a completely different animal with some of the limits they've put on
state income and property taxes alone.
Exactly. And there's a lot of panic surrounding that, but I think that I actually just spoke with my tax advisor last week and had her run scenarios based on estimates on what this year's going to end at, and it's looking pretty favorable. Whereas,
Are you talking about personally for yourself or for clients?
For myself, yeah. And
well, the one plus thing that we get from the tax reform is 20%.
Independent contractors.
Exactly, and the 20% deduction that we get.
It's pretty awesome.
It is.
Yeah. I think everyone needs to open a small business.
Right.
That's how you're gonna combat the California spanking we got with the tax reform. So.
Yeah, and you know what? I think we may see a bit of a boost in independent small businesses with a lot of layoffs coming up. You hear GM announce that they're going to lay off, 15,000 people, I think. There's Reuters, they're going to lay off 3,200 people. And a lot of this is not because they really have to, but because a lot of the economists are seeing a looming recession coming. And they're seeing a recession coming in 2020, and a lot of these companies are now prepping for that. They don't want to get caught up how they got caught up in 2008, right?
Right. They're being proactive and doing it right this time.
Yeah.
I guess if you can do that right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of these big companies, you're going to see a bit of a trend in the next 6 to 12 months of just doing layoffs just to get ahead of the recession. A lot of these people, unfortunately, they're losing their job. It's going to be tough for them to find another job, especially if they work in a specific specialty. But I think the good part is you're going to see some people opening up businesses, and then they would be able to take advantage of that 20% deduction.
Do you think that's going to result in more short sales coming back?
I think short sales are going to come back. Probably not in the next year or two, but I would, if I had to take a wild guess, I'd probably say 4 or 5 years, we're going to start seeing them come back. You would have to have values drop significantly enough to where a lot of people, where it wipes out everyone's equity, right? And a lot of people were able to purchase in 2009, 10, 11, 12.
So their equity gains are huge.
Exactly. Yeah. So for them to lose that much equity to the point where they have to do a short sale, I don't see that. But it's going to be interesting because I know that around that time, 2012 and 13, there were a lot of 5 and 7 year fixed interest rate mortgages done that are now starting to reset or will reset next year. And the problem with that is, well, you have interest rates now going up.
Right.
So their reset is going to be a little bit higher. Now, there are caps to it, as far as the maximum it could reset and go up every year. But, it still affects people. A 1% increase on interest rate can greatly affect your payment, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck, right?
Totally. Or if you just got laid off.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be... I think here in the Bay Area, it's a little bit different. You're going to see a lot of layoffs, I think, more across the country.
Sure.
As opposed to the Bay Area. Bay Area still has a lot of these tech giants that really dominate their industry. So I think between the Bay Area, Silicon Valley, I don't see much of an effect here going on. Yeah, we might see a bit of an effect from the recession. But I don't think it's going to be the same way as 2008.
Oh, no way. No way. We've set ourselves up not to get crushed like that again. Banks did, not we.
Yeah.
But banks did. Banks can't handle that again. And so they're not going to allow that to happen.
Yeah. The one thing that a lot of economists are really scared about is a potential, what are they calling it? Like a liquidity crisis is what they're calling it. Because there's going to be not enough money to pay off student debts.
Oh, yeah.
Student debts, we're talking about, what exactly? It's like in the trillions right now.
Yeah.
And you can't file bankruptcy. You can't get rid of this debt.
No way.
And the problem is right now we're starting to see a slowdown in the housing market. You've got rates going up. You've got the new tax reform bill that encourages people to rent instead of buy. Especially here in California, when you're capped at $10,000 for state income tax plus property taxes. So I think the with the housing market starting to slow down, recession hits in 2020. The one thing I feel right now is it's very similar to 2005, 2006, if that makes sense, where a lot of people, if you talk to a lot of people, they're still desperate to buy. They're still in the, oh, I got to buy mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And even though you explain to them, hey, rates are going up, inventory is up in the Bay Area and across the nation. Pending sales on new homes are down. Pending sales on existing homes are down. And you start showcasing all these different statistics. I think people should hold off and wait to buy because prices are going to adjust. Even though rates go up, and I had this conversation with a buddy of mine the other day, even if rates go up 1%, but if prices drop 10%, you're same.
Yeah.
So, but the difference is, I mean, the question is, well, why would you wait if it's going to be same? Well, you would have more inventory on the market. There's more options.
Possibly, but actually, here's what I've been talking and advising and having conversations around is that, the market shift has hit the media. And once that hit the media, the sellers are now panicking because, oh no, I missed the peak, right? So we're having an influx of inventory that might be premature. They would have possibly held off to springtime, or maybe they would have rode it for another year or two, but now they don't want to miss out. So influx of inventory, seller panic. On the other hand, the buyers are recognizing and saying, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I'm going to take a step back because good deals are coming, right? And so right now we have huge inventory, not so much competition, perfect storm for a buyer because buyers have been used to going out there and competing against, 3, 6, 8, 10, sometimes 20 other buyers for the same house. We're not seeing that right now. Why not go out right now when interest rates are still low and your competition is low? And so you have more negotiation power with these sellers who are freaking out. They might still be stuck in, 3 or 6 months ago price points. So that's the rub right there is, but buyers are seeing opportunity. Sellers are going to be the last ones to give in. It's been told to me that, buyers are the first ones to recognize and accept that there's a market shift. Agents are shortly thereafter, and then the sellers are the last ones to catch up and actually embrace the new normal. So because of that, I think that if any buyer is looking for a sweet deal, now might be their chance because we've got a ton to choose from. You've seen it. We've got a ton to choose from and not so much activity on the buy side of things. And I honestly think that once taxes go through and the conversation around the table changes from we're screwed, we're in California to it wasn't as bad as I thought, then there might be some more security coming back with that. I also think if interest rates go up again, which they will, that a lot of the buyers who are waiting for those good deals will see that same trade-off and be like, oh no, okay, if I keep waiting and it keeps going up, it's not changing anything. I might as well just go, do what I want to do now instead of waiting for the magical unicorn moment or the 2009, 2010 to come back because it's just not coming back.
Yeah, I think that dramatic of a crash, it's not going to come back. If you look at a lot of the economic statistics back then compared to now, we're not quite close when you start comparing income, comparing debt. There's a statistic where they show, well, how much debt are you taking to purchase a property compared to your income?
Sure.
That was much higher in 2007, 2008 than what it is today. So there's the saving factor. People are saving a little bit more. They still don't have as much debt as they did back in 2007 and 8. So there's some metrics you can compare between now and then. Mm-hmm. And I think when you study that, for sure, we're not going to have the same type of collapse. And that's a whole nother story with how the CDOs that collateralize debt obligations and how they package all those bad loans together.
Well, and then just to top that off, we're the Bay Area. Everyone wants to be here, whether it be for jobs or school or just our amazing weather or, the things that everyone wants, food, entertainment. It's kind of wrapped up in a perfect package here, and people aren't going to run away from that. I think the statistic is that there's 40,000 more people moving in to the Bay Area on an annual basis than are moving out. So there's definitely a housing shortage. Some of those become renters, some of those become homeowners. But that's not going to change anytime soon unless tech collapses, in which case we'll probably see some change surrounding that. But the schools are still not going away. The lifestyle, the environment is not going away. So, I think the Bay Area is special.
Bay Area is very unique because if you look at domestic migration, you have more people moving out than moving in. And one big topic is gentrification here in the Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, and now Richmond. That topic's really being focused on in Richmond. But you see this these arguments about gentrification, but domestic migration is a negative. We're seeing many people moving out of the Bay Area. Again, domestic. But you're right in that more people are moving into the Bay Area than moving out, and that's because of foreign immigration. And that's very interesting to see because we're starting to see a lot of people from literally all over the world. I want to say probably a quarter of all the people that show up to our rental showings are now Portuguese speakers, whether they're from Portugal or mainly from Brazil. But that was something that I didn't see even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now 25% of prospects showing up are Portuguese speakers. It's very interesting to see this whole shift, and you're starting to see, and in fact, I talked about this on the podcast a few episodes ago, is one of the issues that we're having with, like in property management. We get applications in and none of it's complete, and people are having a hard time going through our process to get applications done, submitting documents, because it's very different. They're not used to it. They're coming here, they're used to something completely different from their country on how to get a rental. Many people think, oh, well, here's the cash.
Right.
I just get the place.
Yeah.
But there's a process, right? We get the application, we run a screening report, all that stuff, right? So it's a very interesting shift. We still have a housing shortage, you're right. And I think there's so many people that want to live here in the Bay Area, but now we're competing on a global scale. And that's really what's happening. We're having so many foreigners coming into the Bay Area, driving up the prices. They're either coming here with a lot of money or coming here and getting really high paying jobs. They kind of don't know the market, so they're just paying whatever they can to get a place.
Right.
And they're driving up prices. And you're seeing a lot of people that have lived here for a long time starting to move out. So it's very interesting when you look at those different trends and what's kind of happening. Now with a housing market though, and going back to the student loans, the average home buyer historically has been like 34, 35. It's now 32, 33 years old. The problem though is what's going to happen when the 25-year-olds today get to that first-time home buyer age, yet most of them have student loan debt that they can't file bankruptcy today on. They haven't paid it off. That's the scary part that many economists are looking at.
Right. I think the co-signers are going to become more the norm than the exception to offset that. And in addition to that, I think lenders are going to get looser on how they look at those student loan debts, with hopes that someday there might be someone in office that gives some sort of forgiveness and or supplements them in some way.
So yeah, I guess that would be the variable, someone coming in and providing some kind of bailout package.
Correct.
Because we're talking about trillions of dollars worth of debt. I mean, you wouldn't be able to simply just write that off. You would That would cause another financial crash in our market.
Absolutely.
You would have to have some kind of bailout.
Right.
But now you brought up co-signers.
Yeah.
So that might be a very interesting trend going forward in the future, that you might see people purchasing a property together where one person is not going to be really living at the property, but they're just helping out a friend or a relative.
Right. Or even just buying property together because on their own they're not able to qualify for the type of properties that in the neighborhoods that they want, and so then they team up. I actually just closed on one yesterday where that was exactly the scenario. One set of buyers who was just frustrated actually went and started looking in Sacramento area because they just could not afford anything that had any kind of reasonable standard of living to what they wanted. And then they came back after teaming up with a second couple, and then they bought a property together. They were at first looking for a duplex or 2-unit type situation, something with an in-law. But we ended up putting them in a 4-bedroom house, and they're just going to do two household living.
So that's very interesting, because I'm seeing that trend in the rental market. We're seeing families team up together to essentially split the rent, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're going to
Same
rent a
thing.
house for, let's say, $2,600, well, if it's a big enough house where you can have maybe another couple come in and you split the rent, now it's $1,300 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
That becomes very affordable at that point. Sure, you're splitting the rent with another family, but if it's doable, many people are okay with that. And so we're seeing that trend in the rental market.
Right.
So it's interesting you bring that up, because that would be very interesting if we start seeing that in the housing market, where that picks up and people start becoming homeowners, 50% home ownership.
Exactly.
But if you're going to rent a house with your friends anyway, or relatives anyway, if you could buy a house and team up and take advantage of equity in other parts of home ownership, I guess that makes sense, right?
It's a stepping stone anyways. Other solutions to that student debt issue would be banks and lenders coming up with longer loan products more similar to Europe, so like 40, 50, 60-year loans, in order to get the payments down so the debt to income ratios then work again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because nobody's actually really owning homes for 30 years anymore. So nobody's actually seeing the end to that revolving debt or...
Well, we are seeing a trend to people holding on to properties longer. When I first got into the business, the average person held on to a property maybe 5 to 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's now about 14 and a half years.
But do you think that that's artificial because of the crash and people had to hold on to their properties where they would have maybe normally been trading up or trading down, but because the equity went away?
It could be. Yeah. I mean, it could be. But I mean, and there could be a lot of factors involved in that. But yeah, I mean, it could be, right? But the reality is it went from 5 to 6 years to now 14 and a half years. Now, the interesting part is that if you look at senior citizens,
mm-hmm.
the average senior citizen hasn't sold their house in, I want to say, about 27 years.
Right.
So we're almost at the 30-year mark at that point. And that's one of the issues where we don't have enough housing inventory for people to buy, because we're starting to see a lot of the baby boomers now, as they're getting to their 60s, they're not selling their properties. Senior citizens are not selling their properties. They're just staying on.
They can't afford to. They can't afford to, because where are they going to move? Unless they leave the area, it's smarter for them to stay in their property with their $500 mortgage than to sell their property, cash out on their equity, and then turn around and have a $3,000 mortgage on a 1-bedroom condo.
Yeah, and you know what? That's one of the things that Prop 5 was on the ballot, to kind of help encourage a lot of senior citizens to move and
mm-hmm.
keep their Prop 13 tax, and they could move anywhere in the state of California. And it was estimated it was going to release another 45,000 transactions,
mm-hmm.
per year. Unfortunately, that didn't pass and it didn't go through. But that was one of the goals of Prop 5, was to encourage a lot of these people and give them that ability to sell and transfer their tax bases.
Yeah, and at least that would keep some costs down.
Correct. Yeah. Now, we've talked about auctions before
Mhm.
in the past.
That's my jam.
Yeah. So, how have auctions been affected with this recent slowdown in the market and also with the rates going up?
Hmm. So the first thing that I'll say is that the performance of the auctions has mirrored the performance of traditional real estate exactly in this downturn. Sellers aren't happy across the board. Auction, traditional, sellers are bummed right now. Um, I feel like I've been actually getting a lot more business with the auction as of lately, simply because sellers are panicking and they're looking for anything that might give them a competitive edge. And with the auctions, we typically, the results, like 1 out of every 5 auctions, sorry, 3 out of every 5 auctions will give us market value, if not a tiny bit above. The eBay effect kind of takes over. You can put a flat screen TV on eBay for $1. It'll never sell for $1. It's gonna rise right back up to market value. So that's what we see in 3 out of the 5 auctions. One of them takes it to crazy town as far as blowing comps out of the water, where we have feelings that there's no way it's going to appraise. So then we're just looking at terms at that point, because the numbers don't even matter. It's going to come down to the appraisal. Now, the one fun thing about the auctions, and gives my sellers a lot more hope, is that if we do go to crazy town with the price, the appraisers actually are using the bidding history to justify the price point. So we've seen a lot of price points that there were absolutely no comps for, especially in planned communities where, they're cookie cutter houses, they're same floor plans, same square footage. There was absolutely no reason why that property should have appraised at the value that it did, with the exception of the appraiser was allowed to use the hard data from the bidding history. So that adds a little bit of hope to the sellers who are grasping at straws at the moment. And then, of course, there's always the one that doesn't perform to the seller's expectations, and we turn around and put it back on as a traditional sale. But overall, our auctions are producing very similar results to what the market is seeing, and sellers aren't as pleased as they have been in the past. But I mean, if the buyers aren't willing to pay those price points, that's the reality of the market.
Yeah, I think auction sales are still so different from the traditional way people sell their property, right? It's a very unique way to market and sell property. So the one thing I've been very curious about is, well, with the market changing and traditional buyers looking at homes that are traditionally on the MLS on, for up for sale,
Mhm.
they look at it and say, well, properties are not getting full price right now. Well, some properties are not, others
Sure.
do. It varies greatly. But if I see this property and it's been on the market for, let's say, 28 days, I'm probably going to try to offer something a little bit lower, or I'm going to wait till the next price reduction and see what happens.
Mhm.
With auctions, though, are you still seeing, because there's a specific deadline and there's a process to the auction, are you seeing those same type of buyers still making an offer, or are you seeing them maybe still try to lowball a little bit because they think there's not going to be enough bids to support the asking price?
Sure. So what I'm actually seeing out there is that buyers across the board are looking for the great deals now. That they just heard there's a market shift, and they're looking for that deal. The auction starting bid, aka teaser price, is so low that that's satisfying those buyers' curiosity and or search for the unicorn, right? So they all show up to the property, and then they realize they've got competition, because the auctions are set up to have scheduled showings only, no private showings. So everyone does kind of have to come at the same time. When they see they have competition, then it becomes real to them that, it's still worth it to try, but they're probably not going to get it at list price, right? The auction's transparent, so anyone and everyone can see what's going on, and that buyer then has the choice to watch it, and the chances of that buyer being pushed a little bit beyond their comfort level because, well, if everyone else wants it, I want it too, is a lot higher than the closed bidding system where the buyer's coming and saying, well, if I don't get it, then, no big deal. There'll be another one. Instead, they get caught up by the whole activities of everything, and they get roped into the excitement. Do they have buyer's remorse afterwards? Sometimes, but less so than traditional real estate because they know that the next highest bidder was only $1,000 less than them. So that pressure still kind of keeps them realistic about where they landed, as opposed to the traditional buyer whose follow-up question almost 90% of the time when you say, congratulations, your offer was accepted, their next question is, oh yeah, do you know how much the other offers came in at? Because they're instantly starting to think, oh shit, I think I overpaid,
Yeah.
So that goes away too. So a little less buyer's remorse. So I feel like it's still a strong resource, strategy, way to sell property. Definitely not traditional. Still having growing pains out there in the market. Our biggest our biggest naysayers are other agents who don't understand it. They usually shift their mindset pretty quickly when they realize that we're not one of those guys. And when I say those guys, I mean all the tech tools that are out there trying to put agents out of business. We're actually trying to protect our commissions. Everyone gets paid full commissions. Agent involvement is required. So if that buyer comes in, bids on the property by themselves, and ends up not having an agent, I tell them they have to find an agent within 24 hours to get their contract written, because agent representation is a requirement, and we don't double end at all.
Okay, so what you're seeing on the auction end is basically the same trend as traditional home sale.
Yeah. With the exception of the sellers feel a little more hope, I think, and are more excited about having another option that could possibly drive more activity in this market where we're seeing a slowdown.
Mm-hmm. Now, let's talk about Gavin Newsom's plan to build housing by 500,000 units.
Where? That's the first question. Where's that going to happen? And do people even want to be there?
Well, you have two options, really. Either you build up or you find land. And we have enough land where we could build, but one, it doesn't make sense because you would have to spend so much resources just to move society there. And then you have the problem of, well, look at what happened with Paradise, California in the wildfire. A whole city burned down. Now, if you're building out far away from these metropolitan areas, now you're risking a lot of potential future catastrophes, because if another fire happens, and we just had a recent scientist regarding climate change on the podcast, and she was like, it's possible this might be a yearly recurrence with global warming and what's happening. So
absolutely,
if this becomes a recurrence, it's not going to be safe to build in a lot of these remote areas.
No way. There's a reason why people haven't built there in the past. And especially, I mean, going to Paradise, this isn't the first fire Paradise has had. And they even had a big flood last year. So honestly, should there be homes and a city there? I don't know. Should one go back there ethically? I don't know. It's a tough debate. My grandparents actually lived in Paradise for a long time when I was in grade school. So I went there often, and it was gorgeous. thankfully, well, the one surviving grandparent at this point lives in Chico now. So she wasn't party to the devastation that just happened. But that community there, the demographic is, I mean, the median age is 50. It's an older, sleepier town. Who they won't want the new city that gets rebuilt. It's all going to be too flashy, too newfangled, I mean, that's what they were trying to get away from by going out there. You know, they wanted to go to the sticks and get out of the city life. And any new infrastructure out there is not going to be appealing to those folks. And most of those folks are so at an age now that they're not going to get settled somewhere else and then move back again, because it's going to be a good 3 to 5 years before anything, even if people wanted to rebuild, the infrastructure is gone. All that entire area was on septic and well water, and those are all jacked up now. The screwed up part of this is, like, you talk about people who survived and or, you know, the houses that didn't get hit. I think those people are even more screwed than the ones that had their houses burned down, because now they have a house that they can't flush a toilet in and has no running water, and they have no neighbors, they have no grocery store to go to, no school to send their kids to. What do you do with that house?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I think people are talking about selling them back to the city, indemnification.
I'm not sure what you would do.
Yeah. But I think the real ethical question here, circling back to where you started, is it even a good idea to be putting housing in places such as these without acknowledging or giving a nod to what scientists say is, you know, climate change, regardless of what our government likes to think about that.
Well, the government came out and said climate change is real and global warming is real, and there's a big report on it. It's unfortunately one individual that does not believe it, despite what his own government is saying.
The fun guy.
The fun guy.
Yeah.
So the question is, for the 500,000 units, where do we build?
Yeah.
And it comes down to, we really have to build up.
Yeah.
In a lot of the cities that are already established, that don't have that same fire risk as Paradise and cities in remote areas. The problem you run into are the NIMBYs, the not in my backyard people.
Totally.
And I think at some point there has, I mean, and I don't know, I would have thought that point was now, just people realizing the fact that it's simple economics 101,
Mm-hmm.
that you have inventory and you have demand, supply and demand. It's
Right.
that simple. If your supply is very low, your demand is very high, well, you're going to have prices go up. Well, how do you fix that? You either lower the demand,
Right.
which means, what are we going to do? Build a wall around the Bay Area and prevent people from coming to the Bay Area? You can't do that. So the only other way to do it is maybe encourage businesses to leave. A lot of the big companies, and not just tech companies, but there's a lot of big companies here in the Bay Area that people may not be aware about. Tech company, because it grew so fast, got the majority of the negative media. But cities in the state of California don't want that. They want these businesses. It's tax revenue. It provides a lot of funding for a lot of our infrastructure and services. So then your other option is, well, we need to increase the supply. Well, how do we increase the supply? Well, you have to build rental housing, and you have to build housing that people can purchase and live in. Well, how do you do that? Where do you build? And then we go back to that same question. And the reality is, we just have to build up, and people have to allow it.
What if we talk about is it the bullet train?
Mm-hmm.
I think bedroom communities like Bakersfield and stuff like that is going to be the future answer, because if you can commute to San Francisco in an hour from Bakersfield, I don't know what the exact time is, but something like that, then that truly is the answer, is being able to get people in and out of where they need to be in a quicker way.
Yeah, and then if you did that, if you had that type of transportation, you can then build large cities and, like, fairly fast, within a very remote area,
Mm-hmm.
and it wouldn't be as dangerous because now you have these massive cities being built,
Right.
and they have the ability to take you from one place to the Bay Area or Silicon Valley within
Or
an
LA.
hour or an hour and a half, or
Yeah.
LA, yeah. And then that would actually be a very good solution. The problem is this bullet train. Have they even broken ground on this
They
train yet?
have.
They
Yeah,
have?
they totally have. They broke ground, but we're
Yeah, and
still
this
a
is
ways out. But if we could take all our resources and money and minds and efforts and put it into something like that, I think that solutions to our current problems will be found faster.
there's a few companies. Elon Musk, I think, was the first one who publicly announced it, but there's a couple companies that have said this bullet train is such a waste of money, and especially the speed at which it's going to go. It's still not as fast as what current technology is starting to develop, and many of them are saying we could build something twice as fast for half the cost.
Right.
Yet as a state, we're still stuck on building this train, and they're not going to be able to complete the entire project from San Francisco. I think they wanted to go to LA, right?
They do.
On this
Yeah.
on this train, yeah. And
They've had to like take the course off track a little bit because there was some uproar about where those tracks were going to be going through. But again, that goes back to having a limited amount of resources dedicated to that cause has then put us on the slow train. um, and so now we are behind the times as far as what's available and possible today. So again, if we threw all the money that we're trying to create Band-Aid type solutions with at those types of things that could create long-term solutions, I think at a faster pace, so then we can do things with the most up-to-date technology and all of the rest. I think that's a better solution.
yeah, I mean, if you had some kind of transportation where you can get from the Bay Area to your house or to the city where you live in a matter of 30 minutes, even up to an hour and a half. I mean, if you have the technology to get to some really remote areas, you could then build the entire city there,
Mm-hmm.
and then just have people commute. Because there's people that will commute from San Francisco to Sacramento,
Yeah,
where they live.
totally. Yeah, and that, I mean, that's what, 2.5 hours.
2.5 hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of opposition to that train just because it's been so long and they still haven't done much. And like you said, there's been opposition. They've ran into trouble with it. But you have a lot of these bigger companies now saying, hey, we have other options. We need to look at these other options. And unfortunately, it doesn't sound like they've really made a determination on, well, let's look at other options other than this train that they're going to end up building 20 miles of it and no one's going to care. Right.
We'll see.
And I think their goal was to be able to go from San Francisco to LA in like 3.5 hours.
That's correct.
Was
Yeah.
the original goal. But many people pointed out, well, the flight's only an hour, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And then you have, I mean, but going through like, let's say Oakland,
Customs not customs,
but that can be done
even-
fairly fast. I mean, I go through Oakland Airport all the time. It probably takes me 20, 25 minutes to go through security.
Yeah.
And then when you land, you get to your Uber or rent a car and then you're off. It's about the same amount of time.
What about money?
Well, you're talking about round trip from Oakland to LA. You're probably looking at, I mean, round trip, probably 140, 150, right? Southwest.
Sure.
So-
So then what would the train cost in comparison, I wonder? I haven't looked.
Yeah.
So I've
I don't even know what they're going to price it at. But by the time, if they actually finish it, prices are going to be probably just as much or even more
That's true.
because they're going to have to make up a lot of the cost.
Yeah. And then we might have a Spirit Airlines going out of Oakland at that point.
Yeah.
A little $25 duct tape airline.
Yeah. So Sam's got Sam likes to throw in a few fun questions for the podcast, and you're a big fan of Monopoly.
Sure.
So what
Just
are
played
you?
it last night with my daughter.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, she's 5. We played My Little Pony version.
They have so many versions of Monopoly.
They have all the versions.
It's such a great game too.
It is.
Yeah. So what are your favorite strategies, or what's your go-to strategy to win?
Buy everything. And that's not only my Monopoly strategy, that's my real estate portfolio strategy. I mean, if it's possible, buy it. If someone were to try and continue to go around that Monopoly board and just collect, $200 every time they pass go, they're going to be out of commission real fast. But if they start buying up everything, it's all about collecting those rents. So yeah,
Do you buy the cheaper stuff first, or you try to, on the first go around, do you try to wait till you get to the more expensive stuff to buy?
No, if I land on it and I have the opportunity and I've got the money, I buy it.
Yeah.
Because sometimes those cheaper ones end up getting landed on more for whatever reason. And, you never know what you're going to get paid
And
on.
it's cheaper to put hotels on them.
Oh, hell yeah.
And
so
then that's
can
where you
get those
start
rents
collecting
up,
money, yeah.
For sure.
One strategy I heard is once you start building houses, you just build up houses. You don't turn them into hotels.
Okay.
Because once the game runs out of houses, that's it. You can't use outside objects to be houses. So if you got, let's say you got 3, colors all owned up, you put, so you got, that's 12 houses right there. Once the game runs out of houses, other people can't build houses.
So they're just paying you. They're just paying you.
And they have nowhere to go.
So as a commodity, it becomes more valuable just by limiting the actual supply of housing.
Right.
Kind of like
It's
California.
a Bay Area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's California.
That's funny.
Yeah, they should make a Monopoly Bay Area version or
Oh my
California
God.
version.
That would be ridiculous.
There's just like nowhere near enough properties for everyone to go around.
Instead of go to jail, you have to go to a NIMBY protest.
I think you're onto something. You better call someone and put your trademark on it.
Yeah. So, Kerri, if someone wants to work with you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
So look me up, Kerri Naslund Monday. There's no others out there. You can see the spelling in the show notes. You can also find me. I'm pretty big on Facebook. Not so much on Instagram, although in the new year, I'm hoping that'll change. I do also have my own podcast called Real Estate for Real. And so you can find me there. We talk frankly, and we swear a little bit, and we give you the side of real estate that you don't see on HGTV.
Now, how long have you been doing the podcast?
Almost a year now.
Okay.
A year now. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to say podcasting is a lot of fun. It's really allowed me to develop skills in being able to hear other people, what they're saying, and really communicate a lot better. I've noticed my communication with clients has really increased a lot since I started the podcast.
Love it.
Yeah.
That's
It's a lot of fun, and you meet a lot of interesting people in the format that I do. Do you interview people on your podcast, or
I have occasional guests, but even when I don't, it makes me dig deeper into things that I've had on my list to look into or get more information on. So I feel like it's made me a stronger agent.
And podcast name is Real Estate for Real.
That is correct.
Awesome. Yep. Awesome. So we'll go ahead and link that up. Is it on iTunes?
It's on iTunes. It's on Podbean. It's in most of the places.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and link up the podcast to the description. So Kerri, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you.
It was great having you again.
Always.
And I'm sure we'll see you here in the near future.
Let's do it.
Yep. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Thank you to our producer, Sam Lubman. Please subscribe, like, comment, and share the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, iHeartRadio, Google Play, SoundCloud, and anywhere else you listen to podcasts. For more information on my business as a property manager and real estate team, go visit my website at marcguzman.com. I really want to thank all of you for listening. It means the world to me, and I hope today's episode provides you value in your day-to-day life. I created this podcast to help showcase the many great people that live in this world and help share some knowledge that I've learned along the way in life. Again, thank you for listening. Check out our sponsors, and I'll catch you on the next episode.